So, Marcella, can you change the slide, please?
Yes.
Yes, that's us, the local committee from the University of Groningen, the campus Friesland, in the lovely city of Ljouwert or Leeuwarden. This is Marcella in the middle, Irina in the left, and that's me on the right-hand side. And we are now hosting this event. Can you change it, Marcella? Yes. We would have liked to welcome you, welcomed you in the lovely city of Groningen or the lovely city of Ljouwert, Leeuwarden, Marcella. Yes, but we all know that there's some very small virus affecting our lives at the moment. So we cannot welcome you here in person, but we can welcome you here digitally. Marcella, thank you. So we would have liked to explore the linguistic landscapes with you of the city of Leeuwarden, Ljouwert, in the north of the Netherlands, in which we officially speak Frisian and Dutch as official languages, and of course many other languages. And the city was in 2018 the European Capital of Culture, and since then you can see much more Frisian in the linguistic landscapes of the city, in all the bridges that are open, in the signs, in the buildings, sometimes even on the pavement. So here is a small impression of what you are missing out in doing this event digitally, but also a kind invitation to visit us if you are once lost in the north of the Netherlands. Marcella? Yes. So in order, for those of you who didn't attend the Q&A yesterday, a very brief portrait of our project that started last year in September. We want to tackle the formative needs of teachers to deal with linguistic superdiversity in language education by proposing new methods and collaborative learning tools. The project also commits to acknowledging the added value of superdiversity in language education by mapping local linguistic landscapes and discussing them at an international level. The project acknowledges the importance of involving youth, especially those with a minority or a migrant background, in the active discovery processes related to social and lived multilingualism and to their own linguistic repertoires. And it connects foreign language learning and language awareness through social linguistic discussions on language presence, roles, and dynamics in broader social contexts, acknowledging languages and the linguistic resources that young people have at their disposal and promoting their integration into teaching practices. And today we kindly invited to our webinar. We have 3 speakers. Each speaker has about 20 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes for discussions. And Sylvia will be introducing the speakers. Marcella? Yes, Sylvia, she is the project coordinator. She will be introducing each of the speakers, and Marcella will moderate the discussion after each presentation. It's a little bit difficult to have an interactive discussion in this online setting, so we would ask you to use the chat on the right-hand side to ask questions, and then Marcella will pick them up, and then we'll ask you to activate your mic, to unmute yourselves in order to enter a more active discussion of about 10 minutes. So, Marcella, last click. We wish you all to have lots of fun with our webinar. Veel plezier, veel vergnügen today. And we welcome the first speaker. Sylvia, would you like to introduce her?
We cannot hear you, Sylvia. Your microphone is off.
Yeah. Okay, forgot it because I'm always. I was saying that Danièle is currently stranded in Japan, so I would like to thank you, Danièle, for being with us under these circumstances. But she's currently professor at the Faculty of Education at the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. I would also like to say that she finished her PhD at the University Stendhal Grenoble 3 under the supervision of Louise Daben. And she has been researching about a myriad of themes such as, and I picked up some of the website, educational sociolinguistics and multilingual language acquisition, plurilingualism, pluricultural, and plurilingual competence, third language acquisition, third script writing acquisition, multilingual literacies, code switching, translanguaging, plurilingual interaction in the families and the classroom, language awareness, cross-linguistic awareness, language revitalization, and so on and so on. Her most known publication is, and I really say perhaps, because she has been publishing a lot, is perhaps that Compétences plurilingues et pluriculturelles, vers un cadre européen commun de référence pour l'enseignement et l'apprentissage des langues vivantes, from 1997 with Danièle Coste and Geneviève Zarat, a book that prepared what would be some years later the European framework of references for languages that we all know. So thank you for being with us. I also wanted to tell you two details you should know about Danièle. She loves riding motorcycles, and she is with the LoCALL team from the very beginning when she accepted being the critical external friend of our consortium. So thank you, Danièle, encore une fois. Et nous sommes tous très curieux pour entendre ta communication. Merci beaucoup.
Danièle.
Merci beaucoup, Sylvia. Merci à tout le monde. Oui.
Now you can share your screen.
Is it working?
Not yet.
Okay, let's be patient. It took a little while earlier.
Now it's working. So yes, now we can see your screen.
Okay. So thank you very much. I'm so excited to be with everyone today. So hopefully everybody can hear me right now. And I wanted to present you a little bit of my own view into linguistics. Okay, good. So I wanted to present you a little bit of my own view into linguistic landscapes in relation to plurilingual education. And what is important to me in that field is the ability, every one of a few ideas behind the linguistic landscapes. I just wanted to come back to Landry and Boris, who were among the first people to describe the linguistic landscape as a concept used in sociolinguistics to study how languages are visually organized in society. And here you have a few examples with stop signs. And I kind of like them because they are all taken in Canada. And you can see the difference in the lines, especially the one on the bottom right that is in local knowledge, local language in Vancouver. And the one at the top left, you can probably guess that it is in Quebec, which is an interesting one because, of course, in France, you would be stop for a stop sign and not arrêt. We'd never use arrêt for a stop sign. So with just using the stop signs as a trigger to conversations, there's already a lot that we can say about why we are going to use certain languages, why two languages, why just one, why a stop, and why an arrêt, even though in France, in French, we are going to say stop. So why arrêt in another country? So the linguistic landscape is a scene where the public space is symbolically constructed. So the languages used in public signs indicate what languages are locally relevant or are becoming locally relevant. So it describes, in other words, it describes the identity of a city, and it speaks the language, orientations, and ideologies. And visibility with sign posts and signage in the city. Yes? Everything good?
Yes.
So here I insisted not only on the visibility.
Danielle,
yes.
Actually, we couldn't hear the last part because the connection fails sometimes. So maybe if you could come back a bit, just the last part.
Here, the uncover language representations.
Yes.
Signpost, I think in Corsica, and they are just showing that they refuse the language in the French naming of the local places, and they just wanted to have their own languages. So it's also a way to resist ideologies around language use. So the question of durability and visibility, and here I insisted also on invisibility. I saw in your chat rooms that some of you had questions about indigenous languages and often visible in the linguistic landscapes. So I think it's also important to look at not only the languages that we see in the local landscape, but also the languages that we do not see, and why do we not see them. So it's some of the signs that I showed here are, for example, examples of durable signs, languages that are not there, but the cultures are very present, like the totem pole in Canada, and also signs that are not going to last, like the top one is indigenous graffiti, and the bottom one is made of stones and pine cones in a street on the pavement in Kyoto here, representing the diversity of the world. And so stone so far, it's been here for 4 months. But
Yes, Danielle, we cannot hear you now. It was okay until you mentioned that this was only 4 months
a few years
ago.
back.
Danielle, can you hear me?
And you can see that there are 2 indigenous languages. They do not look at all like Whistler. And yes, I hear you. I hear you. Okay.
Yes.
I go on. Yes.
We couldn't hear the last part again.
The middle. Yeah, no worries. I can, not everything I say is important. No, don't worry. So the middle one, for example, is showing 3 languages around Whistler. And you can see there are two indigenous languages. Interestingly, it's in Canada, but there's only English and 2 indigenous languages. There's no French in British Columbia. French is not very present. There are only 1% speakers. But the indigenous languages are very often lost, and so they are not spoken by the communities. But you can see that there is an effort to represent them in the local signage. Although the interesting thing here is also to realize that the way to represent the local place is very different from the English way in those two languages, like nothing sounds like or looks like Whistler. And I like the one on the right, lingerie sale. I always read lingerie sale because I see Christine, I see lingerie. So for me, it triggers my French, but in fact, it's lingerie sale. And so, of course, when I read it, I say, why on earth would they do that? This is disgusting. But of course, this is not what it means. It's another example of a durable sign here on a stone, still in Vancouver, about a local language. So it's first presented in the local language in Alcominem of the Musqueam people. So another example here. And then another thing important to realize is that the environment can trigger certain representations and ways to understand and interpret information. For example, if you see this picture here, and I ask you, where did I take this picture? You may answer different things, and you can't respond to me now because I can't hear you, but probable responses would be first maybe China or something like that. And then because you see that there's some English, maybe you would switch to Hong Kong. And then you see this one and it's going to maybe help you even more to think that it's not, maybe after all, it is in Vancouver, because it is in Vancouver. Because in the last one, you see, once again, an effort to represent a local indigenous language in signage. Here, it's a signpost that I took at UBC, the other university. I'm from SFU, but we don't have signposts in different languages, only English at SFU. But UBC has decided on another policy around language use. Now, if I show you this one, where do you think I took that picture? And most probably you're going to take your information from the newspaper on which the bread is sitting. And so you're going to see France. And so you may think, okay, it's written in French, it's written France. It's probably a picture taken in France. And then maybe if you look at the bottom of the newspaper page, you're going to see Bestia. And you're going to think, oh, maybe it's in Corsica. But then if I show you the rest of the picture, then you're going to realize, no, it's in Japan. In fact, it's a picture I took in Kyoto of a French bakery here. So there is the environment is also going to trigger some interpretation around signage. And here also, we don't always think about how much cultural our representations are. Like, for example, here, the representation of a house is a very culturally way of representing houses. Like, for example, I showed this signage to some of my students here in Japan, and they had no idea what it meant. And I think everybody in Europe would have a clear sense that this means that is a place where you can have a picnic, probably near a highway. And this one as well, same kind of representation. You can have a picnic. There's a tent, a bed, even the cup and the forks and spoon. And the WC doesn't mean very much for people from somewhere else. In fact, this kind of shape is going to trigger for my Japanese students, for example, something entirely different. It's going to trigger tori, which is the entrance of a Shinto temple in Japan. So you see signs that we think are not using words, but are using images, can be easily understood by everyone, even if we don't share the same language, but it is not necessarily true. So there's a big issue around meaning making or not making meaning. Like, for example, I have a very hard time finding my way here in Vancouver, in Kyoto, and you can see why when you see those kind of maps that I encounter in the streets in Kyoto. So it's quite interesting to use signage also to reconstruct stories around signage and their intended audience in time and space. And there's one that I didn't include, one picture I didn't include here, but it's kind of like the one on the left here. And the students explained to me that it meant here women and horses are forbidden. And so it's a very ancient sign, as you can imagine, but it's still in the landscape. And so it tells a lot about what was going on at certain times in a place. And that's another example that might explain why I get so much lost in Japan. And if you pay a little bit of attention, you're going to realize that on those 4 pictures of signs, of maps that I've taken in Kyoto around where I live, you will realize that none of them have the north up like we are used to in our own representations of maps. So we tend to think about and experience the world around us in a certain way that is influenced by our own personal history and cultural heritage. So looking at linguistic landscapes is also a way to try to understand other viewpoints. And so I'm quite interested in multi-perspectivity, and so to look at a relation to space and time, because this is also cultural. Like I'm quite interested, I love it that in Kyoto, for example, days do not have 24 hours, but they have as many as 27, which is absolutely great when it's the summer. So the linguistic landscape is also like material culture, and so, but also immaterial. We talked about invisibility before. So all around the meaning making has to do also with what we are doing and how we attribute meaning to visual objects, how we use them, how we treat them, what they say about us. And so the linguistic landscape reflects communities, history, and family stories, trajectories, status, gender, and or group and personal identities. And also we have to think about age. Like when, as adults, we collect linguistic landscapes, data about linguistic landscapes, our gaze tend to go upwards. So we look at signs, for example, on restaurants, and they are going to be up. But if you look at what children do, they usually look downwards, and they look at what's on the pavement, what's written at the bottom of cars. And here you see kids in Vancouver collecting data on the linguistic landscape in their neighborhood, and who are picking up trash on the pavement and taking pictures of it. And also linguistic landscapes can be seen as visual metaphors. That's a picture I took in Kyoto again, and I was very surprised by what I was seeing, and I could not really interpret it. And I thought, oh, maybe it means that, well, I was influenced by Zen and Buddhism, and I thought, oh, maybe it means when you have a stone in your path, maybe it's a gift, in fact, and you have to see the silver lining in it. But in fact, my students just said it means do not go, do not pass, and the rope is not gift wrapping, it's just to help carry the stone. So it was very pragmatic, but it's quite interesting to investigate the visual metaphors that we can see in the linguistic landscape as well. So once again, understanding multiple perspectives, perspective taking in plurilingual education is key, and in plurilingual education, and it can be achieved through uncovering the narratives that are associated with linguistic landscapes. So linguistics, in other words, linguistic landscapes weave a story. And so it's important to see what they say about us, what they say about our identities, our cultures, our history in relation to local and global communities. So some of the questions that you asked during the chat rooms were about what do you do with linguistic landscapes as teachers? Why do you do it? And I think there is no single and simple explanation. You really do what you have to do in relation to your goal with your learners and your classroom. And I personally like to link it with the linguistic landscapes as sites for learning within what I call a PASTEL framework for plurilingual education. And PASTEL stands for plurilingualism, art, science, technologies, education, and literacies. So for me, the linguistic landscape is a thread to weave together all those different aspects that are going to be the base of plurilingual education. So PASTEL is based on what you may know in English as STEM or STEAM, with the art component, so sciences, technologies, and I can't remember now, never mind. So the key principles are that students learn more effectively when they can draw from their entire repertoire and funds of knowledge and can be active participants in their own learning. Participation is achieved when concepts and procedures are introduced through an investigative approach and is connected to students' prior knowledge in meaningful ways. And plurilingualism is a tool as an asset for knowledge construction. And once again, multi-perspectivity and reflexivity can be achieved through the critical and respectful integration of different worldviews, plurilingual interaction, and translanguaging can create favorable framework to bring in learners multiple semiotic resources to the construction and problematization of knowledge. So that's another way to represent what I just said. So you can see the PASTEL with the P, plurilingualism, the art, sciences, technologies, and literacies. So with literacies and linguistic landscapes as storytelling in the core. So around those different aspects. But like, for example, with you already worked with your language biographies. You are working now with the linguistic landscape.